I'd heard there was a cute flower seller here, but I guess it was just a false rumor. Get it? Final Fantasy VII? Get it?
The Super Nintendo, a console known for its insane amount of classics, most of which I don't know jack shit about, but you know I gotta set the stage here. Despite the plethora of well-known platformers and beat-em-ups, the SNES was also home to a lot of JRPGs, some of which are still heralded as the best the genre has to offer by people that aren't me. Still, it's not hard to see that from a mechanical standpoint, the JRPG has always been pretty much the same old shit since then. Quite radical changes have happened, but usually only from a presentation standpoint. Though those changes were, and are, enough to scare people away that loved those classic SNES JRPGs. No more medieval castles, optimistic heroes, dragons, or cool badass knights and other shit what I guess those people like.
Nowadays, it's all about those emo kids with the tight pants and expensive jewelry and tattoos. Ooh.
Not only the Final Fantasy series, but pretty much the entire genre shifted quite dramatically after Final Fantasy VII came out. However, one series still firmly sits in its 16-bit roots, even though it barely has any of those roots to begin with. Namco's Tales series is what happens when you put games like Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana and turn them into a modern 3D game. And then repeat the exact same process every year or so because... And Tales of Symphonia is the one that we'll be reviewing today because that's what the title of the video says, so I should probably get to it. The story of TOS stars a young man called Lloyd and a bunch of really awkward animations. Also, something about this girl person called Colette being the chosen one as appointed by some dubious religion in order to regain the balance of the world or some bullshit like that. And some shit about these half-elf anime super Nazis called the Zions that have human ranches where they do experiments and other evil stuff. However, and also of course, said dubious religion turns out to be quite dubious indeed. And thus, Lloyd, Colette, and a bunch of other people what they meet along the way have to save the world from evil and come to terms with their inner woes. So, pretty much a very box standard JRPG plot. Almost a bit too standard, and I can totally see people being put off by it. Though it is a very competently told box standard JRPG plot. It has just the right amount of mystery, intrigue, and fun yet interesting characters to keep shit moving along despite the fact that you might be able to see every plot twist coming from miles away. Though some are definitely quite well placed, and I'll just leave it there by saying that there's quite a lot more to this game's plot than what you might think at first glance. But with that said, the game is also very, very dorky. Yeah, that's probably the best way I can describe it. Dorky. If Final Fantasy is the spoiled rich kid and Shin Megami Tensei is the punk rock goth kid, then the Tales series is the nerdy kid with the Naruto headband whatchamacallit. You see, despite the overabundance of dad jokes, the characters also seem to animate like Babby's first Gary's Mod. And not only that, but the recording quality of the voice acting wasn't necessarily done in the highest of bit rates, and you also need to forward the text manually, so any sense of pacing and timing goes straight out of the fucking window. Though the vocal performances themselves are quite good despite that. But even the simplest things like sound design are oddly lackluster. Yeah, I mean, just fucking look at this shit. No music, no sound effects, no grunts, no nothing, and it's really fucking weird. Hell, I'm not even sure if this is at all due to a lower budget, as I can easily see it being because of a bad case of the old don't know what we're doings. And the characters can also be rather cringy sometimes, especially early on. There's some pretty poorly written, forced humor bits here and there, and some characters constantly repeat certain things and actions or act rather unreasonably. But then, on the other hand, it does also have some genuinely funny bits and a couple of well-written character arcs. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, Lloyd and his friends are all kids, so you can definitely expect the annoying child character moments. But most of the party consists out of adults, and they're not like that at all. So, in a way, I guess the bad writing is sort of almost good writing in that it fits the characters it's meant for. And regardless of that shit either way, when stuff needs to get good and gripping, it does do that admirably. There are plenty of memorable moments that are memorable because I remember them now, weeks after playing the game. So that's good, and it definitely makes the game overall a lot more, well, memorable. I have a hard time saying that word, you know. Memorable. The game follows a very traditional JRPG structure, where you enter a town and there's like this problem, so then you talk to the mayor or the local hero or whatever, and then they'll join your party. But then, of course, there's a dungeon nearby town that houses said problem, like a cave, a mountain, or in this case,
Techno Auschwitz.
It's pretty standard stuff, and it's fairly safe to assume that if you don't like traditional JRPGs because you think they're hopelessly stuck in tradition, which they are, then this game won't convince you of anything otherwise. But within its tradition, it does exercise itself extremely well, as it has years of history to borrow from and build upon. You go to towns and dungeons, talk to people, look for treasure, fight random encounters, sure. But none of the dungeons drag on, all of the towns are just big enough, and the encounter rate isn't too high either. It has some awkward things here and there, which I will get into later, but overall, it's really one of the most carefully structured JRPGs I have ever played, either because or despite its tendency to cling to preset traditions. And something that actually does set this game apart from others like it is the battle system. You see, instead of the usual turn-based bullshit, the combat in this game takes place in real time. While you do still get teleported to a separate screen, it is essentially the hacking und the slashing. So instead of menus and full control over an entire party, you get actual combos where you can mix shit up with regular attacks and magic spells. The way that this works is that you're able to assign abilities and attacks to certain directions, and pushing one of those directions in battle while either mashing X or O will let you do the corresponding attack. And all other party members are AI controlled, but will still function in much the same way, as you can set them up to do certain prefab tactics, though your control will remain limited. Anyway, during the fighting, you can guard attacks with a well-placed button press and freely run around as well. Or, I say freely, but everyone's kinda locked onto a rail drawn between you and your current target. It works, though I do have one little niggle to still niggle about. Thing is that when the target switches, the direction you're facing and the invisible rail can get into just a little bit of an argument, at which point the trajectory becomes fuck for 1 or 2 seconds, and you'll likely take a hit or do an attack you didn't mean to do just because you couldn't control yourself properly because of it. It is stupid. Anyway, while control over your party members is quite limited compared to most JRPGs, I really shouldn't understate how much fun it is to control Lloyd in battle. The others, maybe not so much, but there's only about 1 or 2 sections where you're forced to play as someone else. But Lloyd, man. Yeah. Stringing together combos and then ending it with a special move while a magic caster casts a spell that launches the enemy up into the air, only for you to then be able to jump up and smash him the fuck back down again, is fucking grand. It's fast, satisfying, and it makes the sometimes arduous task of dungeoneering quite fun to do. All the while, the game never commits the crime of becoming too easy either. Oh yeah, I died quite a handful of times, mostly because of recklessness, or maybe just because of very well programmed AI that actually reacts to what you do. And also, despite the faster action, there are still some moments where you need to stop and plan out your tactics, which the game allows for, as well as you can still bust out your menu and tell people to do shit right on the spot. It's just a really fucking good battle system that borrows and expands upon years and years of JRPG development. It's not gonna blow any heads with how original it is, but the slight alteration of making the combat hack and slash really adds a lot in my opinion. So yeah, the game controls great in battle, which obviously means that the same goes for navigating the field, right? No. No, it doesn't. Not at all even. Oh dear. For one, there is a lot of clipping and getting stuck on level geometry, which I guess mostly just looks kind of ugly, but it doesn't really affect shit all that much. Well, that is until you actually get stuck behind a fucking NPC. I don't think that this has ever happened to me during my review antics before, so it is a bit telling as to how rough the game is in everything except its combat. Things like the vehicles, for instance, suck pretty bad control-wise. Like, I don't even know how one could possibly fuck this up so very bad. I mean, the turning arc, for instance, is fucking huge. The camera isn't turnable when in vehicle, and the minimap doesn't exactly help with its confusing cone and arrow pointy thingy, of which I'm still not sure which one is me and which is my field of view. And the camera. Oh my fucking god, the camera. It's way too zoomed in. Add to that, the fact that it'll tilt upwards when you near any elevation of any kind, of which there is plenty, and just fuck the world map in this game. I love overworlds to death. Fucking Super Mario, Final Fantasy IX with the airships and shit, or Final Fantasy VII's, which is a fucking atmospheric masterpiece. It works for adventure games, and I honestly feel like there's something missing in certain games that choose linear hallways over a world map. But this is really not great. When walking, it's mostly just the camera, but the vehicles, man. Oh my god. Anyway, despite all of that fucking shit, the game is actually pretty good, believe it or not. It's set in a cute, neat little world with tons of character and characters. Some might be a bit annoying at times, but others are quite funny and in some ways a bit relatable as well. And it also handles dungeons in a pretty cool way, where they're more or less a type of puzzle arena rather than anything battle heavy. Don't get me wrong, shit ain't exactly rocket science, but it does keep the game from getting a bit too grindy. Overall, it's just paced very well, with how things level up, how many monsters are placed in dungeons, the distances between towns, and the story beats. There are a few instances here and there where they want you to go back a bit, or parts where the destination is a bit unclear, but as a whole, it is a very neatly streamlined JRPG. I even mentioned this in a really bad video I made called The Terror of Random Encounters, where I use it as an example of how to make random encounters fun. Of course, I don't bother to explain how and why, because, you know, fuck you, but I still feel pretty strongly about this game's goodness, what shines through its sometimes painfully generic genericness and also slight jank. And at least the sometimes iffy voice acting isn't anywhere near as embarrassing as my early attempts at video.
Gameplay is the most important thing ever. Tutorials are dumb.